It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. What is up? Welcome back to this episode of Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and today our topic is, should you be plant-based? And I feel like we got a couple of angles for this topic, but it's a good one and it's controversial. And I don't know if you saw that Netflix documentary. It's totally lost on me now what the title is, and I meant to Google it before we started. But
Game Changers.
It was that the one where everyone went, oh, I got to go plant-based. I got to go paleo.
Yeah, I think it was first maybe Forks Over Knives, and then that was 10 years ago. And then it was the recent one was Game Changers, I think.
Yeah. And I watched that and I remember seeing everyone all of a sudden posting about it. And I was like, wow, I feel like we all really missed the mark on this episode. And I mean, I don't know what their intention and message was, but I knew what I took from it, which is obviously what we're going to talk about today. So I will let you kick this off because I know we have a lot of thoughts and things to cover.
Yeah. And I did not watch the documentary, but I read the study that the documentary was based on to look at all the pros and cons, because just like any documentary or anybody giving any message, right? It's kind of biased based on what they want their message to be. There was a lot of things that were in that original study that were not shared in the documentary too. So this is not a podcast about that documentary, but yes, I'm familiar. So I got in an argument with a carnivore guy on the internet because, I can't just let things lie. And this is a very nice person. I know him in real life. He lost a lot of weight and feels really, really good being carnivore. But the part that gets me is when people who are following a particular diet talk about the mechanisms to why that diet works, and they are way off base in the mechanisms. So I'm not saying, oh, you can't go carnivore and see good results. It might be really good for some people if it works for you, right? But for most people, it's not sustainable to cut out an entire food group for the rest of your life, right? And then your body becomes can't handle those certain foods and stuff if you eliminate them for a long time. So anyway, his point was that we don't need fiber at all. We don't need fruits and vegetables because our ancestors didn't eat fiber. We don't even utilize it. We just poop it out. It's useless. So I responded with a couple meta-analyses for him to go read, which I didn't hear from him after this. So we'll see. I don't know where he's at in his journey. About how cardiovascular risk and longevity, they both are super correlated with increases in fiber. Okay. So, yes, we poop it out, but it is not useless to our body. Our gut bacteria eats fiber. There are different types of fiber that our body utilizes. So health-wise, there is benefit upon benefit upon benefit of fiber. Okay. Now, this episode is not just about fiber. It's about eating more plants for health. Okay. So whether you choose to eat meat or not, if somebody asks me, should we be plant-based? My answer is going to be yes, we should all eat more plants. Okay. So I choose to eat meat. Jill chooses to eat meat. We also eat a ton of plants, fruits, vegetables, whole grains that are not processed, beans, nuts, rice, things like that, potatoes. We're not anti-starch. We are pro less processed shit.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think people love a name. They love a diet with a name, and it feels like something they can take and run with and execute because it has strict parameters. And not that I think plant-based is restrictive. I think I tell everybody, I'll get questions like, should I eat every 3 hours? Do I have to stop eating after a certain time? And I'm like, listen, in a perfect world, yeah, we would all eat all nutrient dense foods and things from animals and that grow from the ground and eat every 3 hours for our blood sugar and cut our food off a couple hours before bed, right? Yeah, there are things that are optimal or better in terms of health or hormones. Doesn't mean it's better for everyone, just generally speaking, but you have to do what works for you. But all in all, I do think that standard American diet is based on convenience mostly, and people like people don't know proper nutrition because they buy packaged things and they go off of high protein labels or low fat labels. And that's that's probably a whole other episode. I've had that conversation a lot recently, but I feel like people choose convenience, and we choose convenience because it's marketed to us that way. But also like the cost of food, like in my opinion, I think it can be very convenient to eat more plants. And it's also from a financial standpoint, I save so much money on groceries when I buy less packaged items. So obviously that's like a little bit of a sidebar, but there's a lot of benefits to that. And we always encourage our clients to eat more nutrient dense foods, incorporate more fiber via fruits and veggies, right? It's not this like hard and fast rule for anybody of what we include and it's never about excluding anything. But eating more plants and more fiber and more micronutrients and vitamins and minerals and getting all of that stuff is obviously going to make you feel better, right? You're giving your body more of what it needs, and you're nourishing your body and you're giving it fuel, and you're going to feel more satisfied too. And it's going to naturally, like everything, we always talk about adding, not subtracting. Adding more plants is going to make you naturally eat less processed things, less sugary things, less nutrient dense foods. So obviously there's a lot of benefits to it.
They did a study where it was a controlled study with two groups, and they gave one group access to only more whole foods and the other group access to more processed foods. And the whole foods group on average ate 500 to 600 calories less a day. They were not monitored. They weren't told, oh, you can only eat this much. It was, okay, listen to your body and eat whatever you want, but here's what you can eat. And the group that ate more whole foods naturally ate less calories, which correlates to weight loss, right? And health changes if it's whole foods that are nutrient dense. But it's literally just from satiety. Like you feel more full if you're eating a whole potato versus a bag of potato chips that's been slathered with salt and oil. I could eat several bags of little bags of potato chips, right? Versus after one or two baked potatoes, you're going to be stuffed. So adding whole foods has that benefit as well, in addition to the vitamins and minerals and fiber and everything that you're getting that we are depleted from when our food's heavily processed.
Yeah. And protein, were we going to shift to protein? Was that?
I was actually going to say, so I was going to preface this episode by saying the clients that we work with, the people that we work with are general population people. Okay. So the majority of our population is coming from a standard American overly processed diet. So I think sometimes science people will get in the nuances of each thing and be like, well, like let's use a less healthy meat example. Like lunch meat is heavily processed and things are added to it and stuff. Okay. So in an ideal world, Jill and I both would agree, let's buy less processed meat. Let's buy steak that looks like the animal it came from versus bastardized meat that was grown in a farm where the cows are stacked on top of each other, where my chickens are freaking, sorry for my sidebar. I can't help myself. We have chickens and ducks, and somebody I knew got some chickens and they have an HOA. They couldn't keep them. I said, okay, we'll take your chickens. Well, wherever they got them from didn't parcel out the brands, and we ended up getting 2 meat chickens. And I've got to tell you, that changed my perception on buying meat from restaurants, because these chickens are grown and they're genetically modified to grow at such a fast pace that if you do not butcher them by the time they were like 15 or 16 weeks old, their legs will break. They were so fat. It was so horrible to watch this quality of life on this bird. And again, we have chickens that are egg laying hens. We don't buy chickens for meat. So I've never seen a meat chicken in person like that. And that's so sick and sad. So like, we're not saying, oh, just get meat however you can get it, right? But for the general population who is buying heavily processed box mac and cheese and pizza and pasta and not getting enough protein at all, adding any meat is a really easy first step behaviorally. So I start there with a lot of my clients, where it's like, okay, you like steak, you like chicken, you like burger. Let's just start by adding that and adding 1 or 2 colorful things a day. Because again, it's a very easy entry point to just getting more nourishment in their body. We can talk about those details later down the road. If they're already eating like shit, let's just get them some protein first.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I always talk about how it's really important when we work with clients that we meet them where what they're at. Right. So, an example related to this is if a client comes to me and I'm like, all right, let's track your food for a week and see what your averages are. Right. Initially, we want to make sure that they're eating enough calories to support themselves as a human and support the activity and support their goals and all of that. But if their protein is averaging, 50 grams a day, I'm not going to say, okay, this week we're going to get 110 grams of protein a day. Like, no, that's going to feel really unattainable and they're going to feel really frustrated and defeated. So we might start lower. And sometimes that does look like eating an extra protein shake a day, or that does look like eating a lunch meat, right? Because previously they weren't. So it's always like a progression. And, yeah, like Jess said, I now buy my meat locally and it's usually grass fed. Like I pay a lot of extra money for the quality of my meat specifically. I mean, my produce too. I'm not like as diligent about it as I should because Costco is life. But I'm really diligent about our meat and where it comes from kind of two sides, like what Jess mentioned about the quality of life for the animal. And I'm not hard and fast, like I'm not going to eat a cow because like circle of life, that's just the way things go. But I want to make sure I'm not eating things from facilities like that. And of course, you don't always have control, but if I can support locally and get better quality and get it less processed where it's better for my body, like there's just so many benefits to that. Obviously, I budget accordingly, right? And I know not everyone has the same ability as everyone else, but I budget so that I make room for that where we
But
know
again,
spend a little more on that meat too.
But again, in order of importance, we are
Right.
at this place where we've layered on these different habits. And now from a health standpoint, it's like, okay, cool. I buy all grass fed steaks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Some of it is to incentivize myself to not order out as much. I put my budget towards that and it incentivizes me like, okay, you bought this meat. Now you need to cook it.
Some nice steaks in your fridge. You don't need to go get Thai food tonight.
Right. But we're talking order of importance because for a lot of people, buying a rotisserie chicken or buying canned tuna or buying like any more accessible meat is going to be healthier than the processed, refined white flour with sugar that you're eating out of a box is our point.
And that's not to say I buy canned tuna from Costco sometimes. That doesn't mean I am superior and I only eat grass-fed, grass-finished local meat, right? Like I still eat some processed. I still have protein, right? It's just about what we do most of the time. And I know that we probably drive people crazy with all of our like nuances and our butts and whatever, but context is so important. And we really do try to always share all viewpoints and any view that we can, right? And make sure that we're not just giving one hard and fast message and making you feel like a failure if you don't eat 140 grams of protein a day and you do have lunch meat in your diet, right? So we always, like, I want to stress that, and obviously, if there's ever a point where you feel that way when we give a message, we always would love to hear that from people of like, do I need to do this if I'm at this point in my life, right? Because I think that's really, really important, whether you listen to us or any piece of information on the internet, make sure it applies to you and your life and where you're at. Side note. Caveat.
And also to be clear, we are specifically talking about people who are making a choice to cut out meat because they believe it will impact them from a health standpoint. So if somebody, like I have a really close friend and my cousin who is like my sister cousin, like she grew up in my house, who are both vegetarian, one is vegan. Both doing it for the reason because they love animals and they don't want to think about contributing to an animal being killed. Cool. Yeah. Right on. If that is your reason behind it, go for it because that's a great, like, good for you for sticking to your values and living it out. Right. There's nothing that kills me more than somebody who is like, oh, I don't want to see pictures of hunting or this or that, but then they eat meat. It's like, wait, there's a big disconnect there. So anyway, I respect the people who are vegetarians for that reason. Yeah. We are speaking to people who say, oh, you're health coaches, you must be vegetarian because that's the healthiest thing. And that's where the lapse is. So like I have a good friend who she's a friend she went to high school with both of us. She graduated with us and she is a competitive power lifter. She's one of the people that like they wrote Game Changer. Like that audience that documentary was about is about people like her, right? So she's a high performing athlete who eats all plants, but I've seen her food plans for her clients. And she is working with somebody, she's having them hit the same protein targets that we are, if not higher, because she knows it's harder for them to have to, they need to prep, they need to have lentils, they need to have chickpeas, they need to really, really plan in order to hit those same targets with only plants. And she's not eating processed stuff. So even though we have different diets, we both absolutely agree that in either case, less processed is going to be better for you, one. And two, you need to get adequate protein if you want to perform and be generally healthy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I was going to say, anytime it's a decision for, like you said, an environmental belief or a religious belief, obviously that's a totally different conversation. But I will say that kind of segues us into some other parts of this episode, because we want to talk about, no matter what the reason is that you choose to eat plant-based or have more plants in your diet, or if you do choose to eliminate meat in some fashion, just the nutrient deficiencies that can be present. But also we really want to talk about too, like the benefits of having more plants, because I think when you understand that from a health perspective, that's more of the incentive. And sure, everyone always wants to, prioritize physique, but doing these things and prioritizing your health, it's the same premise of our program and always our same focus, that doing these things and filling these nutrition gaps that we're going to talk about, and doing all these things are going to benefit your gut health and a lot of other things. And, everything internally is connected. When you do all of that, like Jess said, based on that study, like you're going to just naturally eat less, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to lose weight, feel better, all of those things. So wild also that there is an argument on this planet that fiber is useless, which obviously we'll talk about.
I know. It's like that's the annoying part, is because both camps, right? We have like these vigorous plant eating communities who are anti-meat for the sake of health. They're wrong. And these carnivores who are saying, no, fruit and vegetables have toxins and it's a
Yes.
burden to our system. Like, they're wrong too. And at the end of the day, if you look at the most healthy people from any diet, from any culture, if you look at like the blue zones and all those people, what thing do they have in common? Some of them have heavily meat, fat type diets. Some of them have heavily plant-based diets. All of them, though, have in common that they are generally active people and they don't eat processed stuff. They eat whole, real foods that are like natural to their environment.
Yep. Yeah. More nutrient dense foods, and they are not sedentary in any way, shape, or form. And I agree 100%. I loved that documentary too about the blue zones. I was like,
this is great.
This is really cool to see. And this is like, I'm like, I wish I could hammer this message into everyone's head. And of course, people still take that and run with it in extremes. And I think you have to just like kind of zoom out from the noise a little bit. And what is the main premise and the main message here? So, okay. I know you talked about some like nutrient deficiencies among vegetarians, right? Like, did your cousin have any issues?
Yeah. So my cousin was a vegan for a while, and she is now she's now a pescatarian, actually. So she was a vegan, then she was a vegetarian, then she started adding in fish and shrimp and stuff, just because she had so much chronic fatigue. And since she added back in fish, and she's somebody who she completely has overhauled her health and lost like over 100 pounds and kept it off for years, like not as a client of mine, just as she's changed her life. She sometimes will share this stuff with me because she knows that I'm passionate about this. And she's just said like her energy levels are so much better and she feels so much stronger and healthier since adding fish back in. So again, it's like a simple thing, but okay, most of the population's already deficient in omega-3s. She probably just increased that a little bit. She increased her protein a little bit without having to try as hard. Like there's stuff like that. But in addition to that, like B12, iron, zinc, what else? Creatine is red meat specifically, right? Like it's really hard to get creatine from anything else. So if I have a vegetarian client, which I've had plenty of, I always have them supplement with creatine monohydrate, selenium, magnesium. There's so many different deficiencies that we can have from not eating meat. And again, that doesn't mean it's not possible to get with very intentional supplementation and plant-based diets. You just have to be really intentional about it if you're going to go that route.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned supplementing creatine, and I want to make a statement on that, because sometimes when I'm talking about fiber and things with clients, they'll say, can I supplement with like a fiber supplement or a green supplement or not Miralax, what's the Metamucil, right? Can I supplement with Metamucil? And I'm like, I mean, let's talk about why you feel like you need to do that, right? Because if you are, it's just like a band-aid on a bullet wound, right? Some type of scenario where you're not solving the problem. You're just putting a band-aid fix on it. Are you just going to eat Metamucil forever? Or like maybe we just like shift our diet and make some small improvements so that you naturally get more fiber in your day by making better choices. Like
Adding like an apple and a handful of blueberries a day or something.
yeah,
Like it doesn't need to be broccoli at every meal.
yeah, a protein shake and then a Quest bar and then a fast food meal. Like, yeah, I'm glad you're hitting your macros, but like if you're eating 2,000 calories a day and you're getting 6 grams of fiber, like we have a huge food quality issue that we need to address and look into. And Metamucil is absolutely not the answer because it doesn't make you change from a behavioral standpoint at all. And it's not going to make you, that's not going to solve your problems. It's not going to make you feel better.
This is one thing I really like about the Whole30 diet or Mediterranean diets. And this is not because I'm like, ooh, everybody go run and do that diet. I don't like that they cut everything else out. I think behaviorally, then at the end of 30 days, people go back to what they were doing before. But it teaches people how to cook with real foods and find flavors in real foods without the extra processed stuff. And usually what happens is a couple weeks in, people are like, whoa, I'm so full. My skin has cleared up. My gut is normal. I'm having bowel movements regularly every day, and they're of a healthy consistency. Like all these different benefits that you didn't realize just from eating more real food. And then once you start adding back in like more normal, right? More normal to America, foods that are a little less healthy, you are now learning like, oh, wow, I actually feel better when I nourish my body. It is not about macronutrients. It's about give yourself nutrient dense foods, period.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that kind of goes too, even with like, mentioning a client who comes to us under eating and eating 50 grams of protein, like that's all of those transitions happened on scale, right? So even when I get a client to eat 80 grams of protein or 90 grams of protein instead of 50, even if food quality isn't perfect, but metabolically we're getting them to a better place because they're eating more calories, they say the same thing, right? Like, oh my God, it's almost like I didn't really know that I felt bad or
my sleep, energy, libido.
Yeah, like all of that. And you start to feel better. So again, it all happens on scale, right? So usually if a client comes to us eating 1,000 calories, I'm not like, okay, we got to get all these nutrient dense things because it's actually quite the opposite. I don't want them getting super full on really high quality foods just yet because we have to get their calories up to a healthier place first. So it happens in steps, right? And again, that's why like habit wise, we work on one thing at a time and not do everything at once. But no, yeah, I love that. I think that's great too. And then in terms of like eating more plants and like nutrient dense foods, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to all of this, right? In terms of your internal health, but with when we talked about fiber and gut, but also from like a hormonal standpoint. And I mean, even around like 70% of our immune system resides in our gut, right? And in our GI tract. And I think that we like so many of our issues like fatigue and poor sleep quality and anxiety, like so much of that is related to your gut. And I think we immediately run to like all of these issues, like not to say that like thyroid disorders are definitely like ever growing and changing and whatever, because for a lot of reasons, but a lot of that stuff does start in your gut, but we immediately go to like, oh, I have hypothyroid or I have this or whatever. And it's like, hold on, let's get to the first thing we should always do is look at our gut and our food quality and how much we're eating. And that's why when clients come to us, I used to do labs for certain functional clients right when they came to me. And I'm like, I actually don't prefer to do that. I mean, if you're somebody that just likes the data and you don't mind paying for it, fine, you can do that. But I'm like, I'm going to optimize these things anyway. So like, let's do that first and see how much better you feel. And then if we still suspect an underlying issue, we go through that. Or of course, if we suspect SIBO or H. pylori or something that does need very specific attention and protocols, then obviously like we'll look into that. But most of the time, a lot of this can be corrected by just cleaning things up a little bit and eating more food. So when it comes to your gut health, Jess kind of talked about this in terms of like fiber and feeding your good bacteria, right, in your gut, because there's good bacteria and bad. You need diversity in your gut. And I was that person that ate the same breakfast every single day for years because I was like, look at me, look how consistent I am. I don't need I don't get bored with my meals, whatever. And it actually was terrible for my gut. Now, again, this is all on scale. If you're eating like shit and you find a meal plan that works for you, meal plan in air quotes, obviously, like a meal structure that works for you and you're getting more nutrients and protein and all of that, great, do it, right? This isn't meant to like make you feel inadequate, but it is important to have variety in your diet so that you do have diversity in your gut microbiome, right? So
I heard another functional coach that we work with say, play in the produce section. Like and I used to say count colors, not calories, right? Like add as many different colorful real foods as you can, because each one of those things, you'll see charts that'll lay out like, okay, the orange foods have these different vitamins. The purple foods have these vitamins, right? Like try to add as many different varieties of whole foods as you can, because each of them are carrying different vitamins, minerals, everything that's going to help our body to thrive.
Yeah. And I'm a big, I need convenience meals too. I get it. I'm busy, kids, sports, all the things, but I don't just go choose like a Quest bar out of convenience. Not to say I don't eat protein bars sometimes, but I try to make a better choice. So for me, I do smoothies because they're super quick and easy. And actually what I'll do, here's like a little quick meal prep tip for you that's super beneficial when it comes to your gut, is I will rotate through smoothie recipes. And I'll prep all of the dry ingredients and put them in baggies for the week. And then I prep all of the cold ingredients and put them in baggies and freeze them. So I might have like blueberries and strawberries and cucumber and spinach, right? And I'll freeze all of that. And then I just dump it in, right? And add water and I'm good to go. And then my dry ingredients might be like chia seeds or flax seeds, or I might add some like MCT oil if I want extra fats, or olive oil or something. But I'm like, okay, I had smoothies last week and I used spinach. So like, I'm going to use kale this week, or I'm going to add artichoke this week instead of celery, right? Or whatever. So I'm always like trying to like find my variety that way. So even if my diet isn't perfect, I'm still giving my gut tons of nutrients and tons of variety. So there are simple ways to do it. It doesn't mean you have to have every meal home cooked and perfect and every meal has to be different for the week, right? Like that's not what I mean by diversity, but you can have fun with it.
I'm very much one of those people who like, I don't follow recipes. Like I will cook and be like, what's in my fridge? Okay, I'm going to mix and match stuff today. So if you are somebody who's on the go a lot and you're like, I don't know, like we're not talking Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and asparagus every meal. It's like, again, colors are great. It doesn't, if you aren't a fan of vegetables yet, you can adapt your palate to more bitter things. So keep trying them, cook them in more palatable ways because you may start to like them, but add fruits for now. Grab some pears, some oranges, some apples, blueberries. I've been buying like snap peas and just snacking on them, like snap peas, baby carrots, cherry tomatoes. I actually do this with my kids. Every meal, I'll have like, okay, we have whatever our protein is. And then I ask them, okay, what colors do you want today? Sometimes they're like avocado, sometimes it's cherry tomatoes, whatever, but it keeps it interactive. But I'm not prepping this stuff. Like it looks like it's girl dinner, right? Like it's a random assortment of things, but just like do the same thing for yourself, add different colorful things. It doesn't have to be some fancy recipe.
Yeah. And I think we tend to overthink food, and I know I'm guilty of that, but like sometimes like clients will ask me like, well, what do you do to get more protein? And I'm like, honestly, I eat 5 ounces of chicken for breakfast sometimes. Like there are no rules here. Like nobody's going to yell at you if you eat a dinner food for breakfast or vice versa. And I do the same thing with Mason, where a lot of times, like his idea of a fun dinner. I mean, he's 11, so obviously he's a little bit more self-sufficient than your girls being younger, but we call it his smorgasbord dinner. And he's like, can I have a smorgasbord dinner? And that means he can go in and pick certain things, and he knows like the air quotes again, but like criteria, right? Of like, we have to have this in terms of our colors and our fruits and our veggies. And yes, you can have ranch, but like, what are we having with that?
Right. My girls are also like, sweet, can I have a roll or a bagel with that or whatever? And we're not ever saying something's off limits, right? We're adding the good stuff.
Yeah. So he loves that too. And Mason's a super picky kid. And it's definitely because I was a young mom and just flying by the seat of my pants and didn't know and didn't introduce foods the right way. Right. And now I'm kind of having to to pay that price later. So it's tricky, but like there are definitely ways that you can get creative if you feel like you have that. Now he's a little bit of like a texture kid too, so that's the other struggle. But there are definitely ways to get creative with that at whatever age, right? It's always a game, right? Like as long as you give them a choice, they're fine. I'm like, okay, this one or this one. I'm not saying you can't have this.
Yeah, but it's your choice. Well, and it helps grow their confidence and their autonomy around their food choices too. So like there's mental health benefits. Okay, so going back to the gut health piece, because we were talking about like our gut health is so important for our immune system, for our brain health. Like we actually produce some neurotransmitters, serotonin in our gut. It's important for all these things. When we talk about adding stuff, we want to pump our bodies with nutrients. So I think sometimes people think like, oh no, I have like, I don't know. We've had people who have mold toxicity or SIBO or whatever, and they think, oh shoot, I should fast or I should do some juice cleanse or whatever. When we run somebody through those protocols, we're actually increasing their calories, but with all whole foods. So we really want to think, add as many nutrients as possible. You do not need to starve your gut, because chronically dieting or being at a very low calorie place is actually a stressor on our body. So stuff that is bad for our gut health would be things like alcohol, lifestyle of being chronically stressed. Being in a chronic diet is one of those chronic stressors. Anything like that can actually really be a detriment to our gut health. So antibiotics, like I was on antibiotics almost daily for years of my childhood, and I've had IBS my whole life, and now I'm healing it through some of these protocols. But we want to also combat all those things. So I just want to point that out, because I think sometimes people are like, yay, I'm going to fix my gut and just fast. And it's like, okay, you're getting rid of stuff. Now, how are we going to repopulate the good bacteria too? There needs to be a plan there, not just diet and then go back to your norm. And it's a cycle.
Yeah. And it's a process, right? So you do have to, essentially, when we talk about like removal of things in these protocols, we're removing like the processed things, right? The lower quality things, and it's temporary, right? We don't eat like this all the time forever. I actually go through these protocols like 1 to 2 times a year for myself, just to give myself a little bit of a reset. But also, like Jess said, if I notice I'm getting a little lax with my meals, if I just am like, all right, I'm going to go Mediterranean for 30 days, it's not for any reason other than, for health purposes, but also like I need to like get back in touch with like cooking my meals and being more mindful and increasing my food quality and having a little bit more variety, because it's easy to get caught up in life, right? And nobody's meant to be perfect, but, in these protocols, you're kind of removing that processed stuff and replacing it with more fruits and veggies, more nutrient dense foods, more all of that. And you kind of have to like wipe out the bad bacteria, right? Because you can have like overgrowth of that. And sometimes it's just dysbiosis is just like an imbalance of that good and bad bacteria, right? So then we want to give tons of fiber and tons of nutrients to feed all that good bacteria and encourage it to be there, right? And then I think an overlooked component of that too is the lining of your gut is super important. And it's going to let pathogens get into your body, and it's important to have that protective lining strong for like a healthy gut overall, and just like a healthy microbiome in general. So,
and that can lead to inflammatory issues, to autoimmune issues, and to a lack of nutrient absorption. So if people, like most people, benefit and sleep better when they take a magnesium supplement. And it's like, okay, but why isn't our body absorbing the magnesium we're eating if we think we're eating healthy all the time, right? So maybe there's something that we could heal at a deeper level. And then when you add those things back in, your body responds better. So like, again, my IBS, I'm putting in air quotes because I think it was a reaction, a gut issue that was caused by chronic antibiotic use as a kid. I got to the point where like I looked pregnant if I ate beans. I had such a bloating reaction, and I love beans and I used to eat them all the time, but I didn't eat black beans for probably like 3 years. I went through one of these protocols where it's tons of nutrients, whole foods, no gluten, no added sugars, no dairy for like 60 days. I've now been able to eat beans for 1.5 years without like toxic fumes pumping my husband out of the house. Okay. Like I reintroduced these foods, and now my gut is working fine because it's able to process things the way it's meant to process things, because my gut actually healed.
Yeah. And I think that's so many people are like, oh, I can't eat this, or I think I'm, allergic to this or whatever. And oftentimes these food sensitivities is just suspected. Sometimes you do have food sensitivities, and right, that's like a whole nother conversation in terms of your gut microbiome. But a lot of times what I see is you have inflammation in your body, and this gut lining is letting these pathogens in and out, right? And it gets messy, and that's what's going to cause your body to react that way. And sometimes, like, I know I got to this point where I felt like every time I ate, no matter what I ate, I was like bloated. I looked 9 months pregnant all of the time. That's not normal, right? You don't have to normalize that. And typically that comes from like all of that processed foods that we eat in the standard American diet. That also is going to cause dysbiosis in your gut, right? Like an imbalance of that good and bad bacteria. And sometimes just cleaning that out and going through a protocol like this is really helpful. And not to say we do this for every client, and not every client that has bloating needs a protocol and has SIBO, right? All of these issues. It's just to kind of understand the benefits and like what can cause those things to make you not feel as good ultimately.
And again, our episode today is add more plants, add more fruits and veggies, and real whole starches that grow on plants. Other things, because we just talked about gut dysfunction, other things that are symptoms of leaky gut or some sort of microbiome dysbiosis would be skin reactions like eczema and psoriasis, environmental allergies. If you start having allergies or food sensitivities, that could be a reaction to chronic inflammation. Mental things, so brain fog, ADD, depression, anxiety. If that is something that is new for you and you're like, what the heck, this has been going on for a couple of years, oftentimes it is very much rooted and can be healed starting with the gut. And again, I am absolutely not saying like, oh, go eat a fruit and veggie and your depression is going to go away. Like I also believe in treating the whole person, right? But a lot of times we can get to the root of this stuff. And we have clients who literally are like, my biggest win, I didn't hire you for this. And my biggest win is I've come off of my antidepressants. I've come off of my thyroid medicine because they're just healthier.
Yeah. Yeah. And coming from somebody with ADHD, I actually came off of my Adderall through one of these protocols. And don't get me wrong, if you've been on these medications for a long time, it is a pretty brutal transition. And I pushed through, and I ended up being no caffeine, no Adderall, and I'm back on Adderall now. And it's like a cycle, right? I think I fixed things in my gut. I mean, I had H. pylori. I don't deal with the anxiety that I used to, and I fixed a lot of that cognitive stuff. And I think that the ADHD, like Adderall is a medication, right? So I kind of like keep reopening that wound, and that's something that I have to figure out. But like Jess said, it's a whole person thing. It doesn't mean I necessarily have this gut issue. Now, could there be something that can be optimized? Probably, because, something with very type A personalities, you do have to give a little bit more support to like the lining of your gut, because it's stress, right? And Jess kind of mentioned this. So I take a couple of things for that to support that mucosa barrier in my gut, because that's just the way that my personality is. So again, like there could be something deeper, but it is important to understand that a lot of that stuff is tied to your gut. And like they always say your gut is your second brain, right? And I think it's important to understand that connection from all of the cognitive associations that can come from either good or bad gut health.
There's also, we talked about a lot of different colorful fruits and veggies. Adding herbs can be excellent too. There can be antimicrobial effects. You'll have some functional practitioners who will write a protocol to get rid of some of these very specific issues just with real things, but adding ginger, turmeric, garlic, bitter foods like cilantro, change it up in the things that you're adding, because all of those can be supportive of healthy gut bacteria. And then people talk about probiotics a lot. So fermented foods are excellent, kimchi, kombucha, things like yogurt or kefir. But I don't think we talk about prebiotics very much. And I do think that's a big thing that helped me once I shifted my focus to that. So I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, so I struggle with fermented foods just from like a preferential, that's just like, I don't love them. So that is a case where I do tend to supplement. That's not to say I don't eat some of them, right, to support my gut. But it's also important. And this is something that I learned in one of my functional courses. I thought you could just willy-nilly buy a prebiotic or probiotic and you take it forever and you're good. But when we talked about like variety, it's actually really important to rotate these supplements. Of course, like priority is rotating the foods, right, that you're getting them from. But if you're taking supplements, it's important to rotate them to get different strains of the bacteria to support your gut health. And that was something that I didn't really know much about until I went through that most recent course that I took. But it's really fascinating. Of course, I like nerd out about it to learn those different strains, right? And how beneficial they are, and kind of like the different benefits of those different strains and how much you need, right? In terms of balancing your gut. So from that standpoint, it can be super beneficial to supplement those to make sure that you're getting enough. Again, of course, supplementing and using outside sources isn't always the most ideal. Fruits, veggies, whole grains, all of that are going to be good sources too. But prebiotics are just like fiber in that they're like food for your good bacteria, right? To help balance your gut environment overall. And then, you kind of talked about the omega-3s and fatty acids, right? Just like fattier fish. So all of that is beneficial for the anti-inflammatory and the
Yep. And colorful things. Again, think salmon, like a variety of colors. And prebiotics too are like, so people I think talk a lot about green bananas are a prebiotic. So even though for us, it's like, okay, it doesn't provide that much nutrients, for our gut health, it does. I buy a prebiotic supplement just through Amazon, but I like the ingredients. It's like Jerusalem artichoke and green banana powder and something else, but it's all whole foods that are powderized, right? It's not some proprietary blend of chemicals. It's like, okay, it's just food that's good for your gut. I would rather get my fiber from somewhere like that than from just like a psyllium husk or Metamucil, which I used to take all the time. So that's fiber, but in the form of prebiotics. And then we didn't talk about this yet, but resistant starches is another thing that, like, when I was going through these protocols myself, something I learned a lot more about. So like potatoes and rice, if you cook them, and it doesn't matter what kind, like I think a lot of people for a while were anti-white foods because they were like, they're not lacking nutrients, they're not colorful. There's different benefits from every food. They both, again, my stance is if it grows, it's probably more healthy for you than something in a package. But white potatoes and white rice and sweet potatoes, whatever, if you cook them and then cool them immediately, it turns it into a resistant starch, meaning it's a really good gut health thing for your gut bacteria to eat. And the neat thing about that is if you then reheat them later, it stays a resistant starch. So a lot of times I will just I'll batch cook a bunch of potatoes. Like I'll put them on a baking sheet and batch cook them, and then I'll put them in the fridge. And then later throughout the week, I'll pull them out and I'll reheat them with my eggs or with my dinner or whatever. But now it's a resistant starch because as soon as they were first cooked, I cooled them immediately.
Yeah. Yes. And you mentioned green bananas. That's another form of the resistant starch where it has that more beneficial bacteria or whatever when it's green, right? But when it's yellow, it's a different thing.
It changes.
Right? It changes. So yeah, that's super important. And that's funny. I actually learned that the first time I went through one of these protocols too. And, my coach was like, heat your potatoes and then cool them. And I'm like, okay, why?
This is dumb. Yeah, I thought it was. It really helped my bowels. Like my bowel movements got more regular immediately when I started. And again, this was a whole protocol, so I wasn't eating processed wheat at the time. But it was wild how quickly like my shit got healthier, guys.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then okay, the vagus nerve. Were you gonna?
Yeah, so like we talked about, stressors can cause issues to your gut lining, right? What we want is to balance out our stress load. So we are going to have stressors in our life. There's environmental stressors we can't control. There are life stressors of kids and family and relationships and whatever. There are all these different stressors. The good stressors of us exercising, right? We want to be able to recover and balance out those stressors. So we want to also provide recovery inputs. Now, I think a lot of times people hear like, oh, recovery methods, ice baths, sauna, whatever. Well, a lot of it is actually like mental and has to do with our breath too. So that is where the vagal nerve theory and all of that, if you can send slow down signals that say, hey, you're safe, our gut won't have as much breakdown. Our gut will thrive if we feel like safe recovery mode versus chronic stress mode. So, okay, go ahead. Vagus nerve. I just wanted to give a segue into that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually read a book. You have to, if somebody wants it, you can message me. It was a short, like very potent book specifically about the vagus nerve, what it does, all of its functions, which are truly fascinating, and just all of the benefits of what it can do and how to stimulate it, because all of our dopamine seeking habits and behaviors and just go lifestyle, it almost is like desensitized, right? But doing simple things like even taking breaths and like pausing before you eat can be so incredibly beneficial for your digestion, right? And breaking down that food. And then another thing I would tell some clients to do if they were having issues with bloating would be to put their legs up on the wall for a few minutes after they eat their meals, because it's sending some like rest and digest signals to your body and to your digestion. And then there are things you can do like humming and breath work and meditation are all really, really great for stimulating your vagus nerve, even gargling. I know it sounds wild. There are some like really cuckoo ones that can stimulate your vagus nerve, and it's really cool and it's really fascinating. But you can kind of like almost wake it back up, for lack of a better term.
Like there's a connection between your brain and your diaphragm. So when people in yoga talk about taking deep belly breaths and stuff like that, it's like, okay, there's a physical nerve signal that happens when we do that stuff. So this is not like some woo-woo thing. It's like there is science that shows, okay, this is what's happening. And then it sends a signal back to our brain saying, hey, you're good. So that's where like these deep tones of Om and Jill talking about humming and stuff like that, there's a physical response in our body when we do things like that. So again, like on first glance, this sounds so silly. There's really science behind every single piece of it in terms of how our brain is connected to our different body parts.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the brain uses the vagus nerve to influence gut function, right? And it helps regulate GI activities, in response to stressors or hunger or, other factors like that. And then the gut, sends signals right to the brain about the gut microbiota, right? And that's all transmitted via the vagus nerve. And that's that essentially connection that goes both ways between your brain and your gut. Which is where the gut being your second brain comes from. And then your hypothalamus, which is a gland in your brain, senses when your body is stressed, right? And that it's like your cortisol response. It's a whole cascade of events that happens where like cortisol is released from your adrenals, right? And it's this process when you have an acute stressor. Of course, chronic stress is that response happens and we don't fully recover from that. But it impacts all of those cells in your gut. And I've used the example of, like if there's a bear in your house, right? We kind of send like all of our attention and our body goes to our limbs, right? That's our body's response of like, okay, you need all of your energy, all of your blood flow directed to your limbs so that you can just escape this danger, right? And that takes away from your gut and its ability to digest, right? Because there's a bear, your body's acute response, thank God we have it, right? This is the benefit of cortisol. The last thing your body is worried about is you processing the sandwich you ate for lunch if there's a bear in front of you, right? So when
or at a deeper level, our reproductive system, like immediately when our body is in that sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight space, it is now in survival mode, not thrive and reproduce mode. So gut function slows down, but again, this is one of those things where like, I'll just brag about how we are like the reproductive health program of Delaware, because we've had so many women who are like, I could never get pregnant. And this is crazy. 4 months into your program and I'm pregnant. And it's like, we didn't do anything special. We're just getting you to feed your body more nutrients and stop running 7 days a week. And your body is not having all these stress signals. And it's saying like, oh, cool, we're not starving. Now we can reproduce. Now our gut starts to function again. So again, this is not like a, yay, perfect thing. Like everybody has their own things going on, but we need to send those recovery signals to say, hey, body, you're safe if we want our gut to thrive.
Yeah. And, like a highly processed diet is a stressor on the body, right? It's a lot going on. And I always use the analogy when I'm talking to women about this of like, it's almost like we turn the lights off in some of the rooms inside, right? Like reproduction, our body's like, nope, turning that light off. Like, I can't do this. Can't keep that light on right now. Like digestion, nope, turning that light off.
Got to store energy. Yep.
Yeah. And all it is like, we're kind of helping your body turn all the lights back on and function and clean things up. And that's really the point of, when we're talking about plants and fueling your body. And I think when you understand how massive of an impact just small changes can make. And it's, again, like Jess and I always talk about, like what you do most of the time, not all of the time. I still love a margarita. My husband said Boston cream donut the other day, and I was like salivating at the mouth, right? Like I still love those indulgences too, but I'm very mindful about taking care of my gut health and all of the other components, right? And like, again, Jess said, whole person. So yeah, I think we could obviously do a whole episode on all of that, but I think we got the point across of gut health in terms of that.
Cool. So yeah, going back to the main topic, I guess like one, evaluate if you are plant-based, meaning vegetarian or vegan, consider your reason behind it. If it's for the animal, like right on. If you think you're doing it to be more healthy, please add protein, whether you choose to add meat or not. Most people that we've worked with, we have them all track their food before we ever give a recommendation. Most are under consuming protein. And then second is whole foods, regardless if you are choosing to eat meat or not, add more whole foods because, again, 9 out of 10 vegetarians that I've worked with are eating things out of boxes for most of their meals, and they're just missing all their vitamins and minerals because they're not actually eating healthy. They're just cutting meat. And then I guess we didn't really go into this, but in terms of like, we keep talking protein. Like, protein is not just a bodybuilder macronutrient, guys. It's not just for muscles and aesthetics. Is that a cool benefit? Yeah, sure it is. But every single tissue in our body is made up of amino acids and proteins. So do you want healthy skin and hair? Protein. Do you want healthy organs? Protein. Every single tissue that needs repaired throughout our life from different issues pulls from amino acids, which come from our protein. Okay. So that's why it's so important. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't have aesthetic goals, so it doesn't matter. For health, that's why you need it. Your bones, your tissues, your muscles, your cartilage, all of it.
I have so many people. I had this very silly TikTok video go absolutely nuts like 2 years ago about protein, and it has literally like over 5 million views. And still to this day, I get comments on that video that say, I don't lift weights, so how much protein should I eat, or whatever? I'm sedentary. And I'm like, it doesn't mean you don't need protein. It's like Jess said, right? It's very much perceived as like this taboo bodybuilding macronutrient. It's like, no, you need this for so many other reasons in terms of your health. But of course, yes, it does promote muscle growth. It prevents muscle loss when you just
helps with fat loss.
You're dieting. Yeah, it helps prioritize fat loss and maintain muscle, right? So not getting enough protein in your diet can result in your body using muscle for energy, which is negative from a physique standpoint of, yeah, you're not losing, if the scale is going down, wouldn't you rather see it go down because you're losing body fat and not muscle? You want to look toned and fit and strong and all these things, right? But also from a health and longevity standpoint, losing muscle mass, like when a woman comes to me at 40 and she's like, turned 40, day of my birthday, my metabolism just nosedived instantly. And I'm like, no, it didn't. Like, it didn't do it because of your age. It did happen because you're doing HIIT 60
time.
You eat 60 grams of protein and you keep dieting and you're losing all this muscle mass, right? So,
and the older we are, the more and more important it becomes for longevity and for health, especially for women. So like after, I forget the ages, but it's like 55 or 60, our muscle starts to go away naturally, right? So it's really important to keep sending those signals of protein and strength training both. At a minimum protein, because everybody is eating. If you're listening to this, you have to eat, right, to stay alive. But at a minimum protein to avoid osteoporosis and sarcopenia and dying if you break your hip and end up in the hospital. Like, it's so important to put on muscle and maintain muscle as long as you can, especially more important as you age.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's it. I think, again, that could be a whole other episode about just protein, but, it's also beneficial from a hormonal regulation standpoint, stabilizing your blood sugar. And we did other episodes, and I'm sure we talk about this all the time, but, your meals, like incorporating like protein at breakfast is super important. And, I always talk about building your meals around your protein. And if you do that, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel more satisfied. You're going to have less cravings, right? Like so many people will be like, oh, I just crave sugar. I'm a sugar addict. I can't stop. And then they show me their food diary and they eat 40 grams of protein. I'm like, yeah, I would crave sugar all the time too. My husband is going through this right now, like dieting phase, and he's like, I'm so hungry. And last night he was like, I'm starving, but he does not track his macros or his calories. It's just he doesn't want to right now, and that's fine. But last night he literally took 2 chicken breasts that we had prepped out of the fridge, cut them up, cooked them, and had them with some sauce. And he was like, I know I ate a lot of calories today, but I was hungry. And that's kind of what he does. Now, do I think everyone needs to be full meathead and eat 200 grams of protein a day? Of course not. But he knows that, right? And he talks about it all the time. He's like, look, I'm just going to eat protein and I'm not going to snack. I'm like, perfect. If that's what makes you happy and what makes you feel good, right? But yeah, it's so underrated for so many reasons.
Cool. So should you be plant-based? Yes, but not in the way that documentaries will lead you to believe. Whether you choose to eat meat or not, please add plants to your life. That is our message for today.
That's the premise. Yes, everyone should eat plants. If you choose not to eat meat for environmental or religious reasons or something, have at it. That's your life and that's your personal decision, and that's great. But don't, like, if you have health concerns and you are going plant-based, I highly doubt animal protein is your issue. So don't run to just cut out meat because someone else demonized it on Instagram. Do your research, do what makes you feel good. Getting protein is important. And just
the micronutrients in meat are important.
Yes, just start incorporating more plants into your diet, and I guarantee whatever problems you have, a good majority of them are going to be solved. So is that our message for plant-based? Did we get our point?
Good. I think so.
All right. Well, that is all, guys, for this episode, and we will see you next time.